I thought the road would be freedom. Wide, unending highways stretched under the glowing neon signs of truck stops, framed by dark forests and endless flatlands. Everyone tells you about the beauty of driving across America, how the landscapes shift like moods, one state bleeding into another. I wanted that American road trip dream. What I didn't know was how quickly a dream could collapse into something else. A nightmare buried in tar, dust, and silence. My name's Eric, and I swear what I'm about to say is true. This isn't some campfire story or some tale I pieced together. It happened to me alone in the middle of the country. And to this day, every time I see an empty stretch of highway vanish into the horizon, every time I catch a whiff of gasoline and iron, I remember. I remember too much. It was June, hotter than hell that summer. I had just graduated from a college in Ohio, and instead of taking the job I was offered in a dull cubicle somewhere, I rented a cheap old Ford Escort from a used car dealer and decided to drive west. The plan was simple. Start in Ohio, head through Illinois, swing south a bit toward Kansas, then eventually climb into Colorado. I had some savings, a couple beat-up notebooks, and a restless urge to see the country on my own. The first states passed like songs on a playlist. Illinois cornfields blurred past. Indiana farmhouses stood like faded teeth in the gums of the land. At night, I pulled into chain motels, rooms with buzzing yellow lamps and heavy curtains, the smell of bleach clinging to the sheets. I thought all of that, the stale familiarity, was the worst thing I'd encounter. I was wrong. Kansas stretched like an ocean, long, flat miles. The car radio flipped in and out of static. I wasn't paying attention until a battered green highway sign flashed by. Shorter route to Route 50, 12 miles. Route 50 had always fascinated me. Locals called it the loneliest road in America, a thin scar slicing coast to coast, sometimes running through towns on the brink of decay, sometimes through wide patches of nothing. I'd read legends about cars disappearing on it, UFO sightings, ghost towns, serial killers, everything you don't want to believe but secretly wonder about. The sign looked freshly painted compared to the rusting pole it hung from, but I was tired of endless interstate monotony. Yeah, why not? I turned the wheel. That was mistake number one. The shortcut began like a normal county road. Cracked pavement, dry weeds leaning in from untended ditches. After 6 miles, though, my phone lost all signal. That wasn't unusual, I told myself. Rural Kansas, dead zones everywhere. But then the road narrowed, losing its painted center line. It climbed ever so slightly into low hills, land folding where it should have stretched flat. Civilization vanished behind me like it had been erased. That's when the first strangeness started. A building appeared to my right, what looked like a diner, chrome siding dulled with weather. A tilted sign read, "Mavis's Place," letters eaten by rust. Except, it wasn't on my map. Not Google, not the paper atlas I had tossed on the passenger seat. Parked outside was a single car, an ancient Buick. Windows tinted dark, too dark. I slowed, almost pulled into the gravel lot, but something in my gut flinched. There weren't any lights inside, not even a faint glow of neon in the window. Just stillness. That stillness followed me, mile after mile. The shortcut stretched longer than 12 miles, then 20, then 30. My gas gauge dipped lower. No crossroads branched off, no other cars passed, only the same dark trees, the same burnt grass. When the sunset died, night fell brutal and immediate, blacker than I had ever seen in the Midwest. My headlights reached out into what felt like nothing, a road leading forward, yet refusing an end. And that's when voices began. Not from outside, from the car radio. It had been all static since I'd turned off the interstate. But suddenly, faintly through the hissing, I heard a whisper. A man's voice. "Don't stop. Whatever you do." I froze. My hand hovered over the dial. The voice flickered out. Another channel burst alive, and this time it was a woman, her tone ragged, close to breaking. "It's behind you." I slammed the power knob, killing the radio, but the static didn't stop. It vibrated faintly from the speakers even after the car went silent, like something deeper, older, using the wires themselves to breathe. I drove faster. The trees closed in, leaning over the road. Shadows swelled between the trunks. My headlights caught flashes, shapes that didn't belong. A figure, maybe, too tall to be a man, standing at the edge of the ditch and facing the highway. Then gone. Mistake number 2 was when I looked in the rearview mirror. At first, nothing. Just shifting blackness. But then far, far behind, splitting the darkness, a second pair of headlights glowed. Someone else was out here. Relief shot through me. Another traveler, maybe some farmer heading home. But as the minutes stretched, the second car didn't close the gap. It stayed the exact same distance behind, always a little dot of white light. Then, it blinked its high beams. Once. Twice. Signaling.
I pressed harder on the gas pedal, the escort rattling in protest. The other car mirrored every move, speeding when I sped, slowing when I eased off. Then, the worst part. The lights vanished. One moment, they were there in the rearview mirror, dots like twin eyes staring. The next, they were gone, like they'd been thrown off a cliff into the dark. That stretch of highway lasted forever. But finally, a sign appeared up ahead, washed dull yellow by my headlights. My chest lifted with hope. Route 50 Junction. Just 2 more miles. I nearly cried as the car rolled back onto civilization. A smooth double-lane highway, wide and broad under the moonlight. The shortcut was behind me. Or so I thought. The first town I saw wasn't on the map either. A cluster of boarded-up storefronts, a flickering streetlight buzzing like a half-dead bug. But one building glowed steadily, a roadside motel called Night Rest Inn. I was too drained to push further along Route 50, so I pulled in. The parking lot was empty, except for one car. My stomach turned when I saw it, a Buick, ancient and sun-faded, parked beneath the cracked neon sign. The same Buick I'd seen outside that diner. For a long second, I considered jetting out of there, but exhaustion won. I cut the engine. The front desk bell echoed like a funeral chime. After a moment, an old woman shuffled out of the back office. Her skin looked dry as paper, her gaze sharp and unfriendly. "Check in?" she rasped. "Just one night." She slid a key across the desk, old brass, dangling from a wooden tag carved with the number 6. "Cash only," she murmured. In my room, the wallpaper peeled in strips. The air smelt faintly of mold. I locked the door, double-checked the windows, then collapsed onto the stiff mattress. I told myself sleep would erase it all. The shortcut, the voices, the Buick. Just nerves. But around 3 a.m., I woke to headlights directly outside the window. I peeked through the curtain. The Buick was idling right in front of my door, engine low, lights glowing straight at me. When I blinked, it was gone. I woke drenched in sweat, the image of those headlights burning behind my eyes. The Buick idling outside had felt too solid to be just a dream. The room still smelled of mold and dust, and something sour, like rust or blood left too long in the open. I didn't sleep again that night. At dawn, I packed my bag quickly, tossed it back into the Escort, and tried to check out. The lobby was empty this time. No sign of the old woman, No sounds of life at all. I left the brass key on the counter and stepped outside. That's when I noticed it. Tire tracks in the gravel, fresh ones, pressed deep from where the Buick had sat all night, facing my door. I got back in the car and drove fast, too fast, the motel shrinking behind me as though it had been waiting for me all along. The loneliest road looked normal at first. Wide sweep of asphalt under a rising sun, stiff prairie grasses bending in the slow wind, telephone poles marching like soldiers toward the horizon. I thought maybe now I could breathe. Maybe I'd escaped whatever that shortcut had been. But Route 50 had its own reputation, and I was about to learn why. By noon, the escort had eaten up more than 200 miles. Hardly any towns, just gas stations that looked like time capsules from the 50s, peeling Coke machines, old men staring like they hadn't seen travelers in days. In one station near Dodge City, I asked about Night Rest Inn, just to be sure it hadn't been some hallucination. The old man squinted, his face leathered and unreadable. "Never heard of it," he muttered, and turned away. When I walked back outside, my heart nearly froze. The Buick was parked beside my escort. Same dents in the fender, same tinted windows, completely silent. I dropped my bag into the passenger seat, shoved the key into the ignition. My hands shook so bad the key scraped metal before I finally jammed it right. I pulled out fast, gravel spitting behind the tires. But in the rearview mirror, the Buick didn't follow. It just sat there, watching. Hours later, I saw the first person on the roadside. A man, maybe late 30s, denim jacket, thumbs stuck out, long, scraggly hair covering half his face. Normally, I'd just fly by. I'd heard too many hitchhiker warnings. But something about the loneliness of that road made me think twice. Maybe I just wanted company, someone to tell me I wasn't slowly going insane out here. So I pulled over. The guy leaned into the window. His eyes were pale blue, almost too pale, like the color had been bleached by the sun. He smiled crookedly. "Heading west?" "Yeah," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. He climbed in without hesitation, slinging a small backpack onto his lap. The smell hit me instantly, like burnt wood, metal, and something faintly animal. "Thanks," he said. "Most folks don't stop round here." Silence stretched as the escort hummed along the asphalt. I kept glancing at him from the corner of my eye. "You've been seeing things?" he asked suddenly. My stomach dropped. "What?" He turned that pale stare toward me. "On this road, things ain't meant to be seen. Cars that follow, places that shouldn't exist, voices in the wires." My grip on the wheel tightened until my knuckles blanched. I hadn't told him any of what happened. Not the Buick, not the shortcut, not the motel. "How do you know that?" He smiled faintly, teeth yellow and uneven. "Because I was on that road too, years back. Thought I'd never come off it." The escort rattled over a bump, the silence swallowing the rest of the words. I wanted to press him, demand answers, but the man leaned back, eyes drifting half shut as though he were done speaking. That's when I noticed his hands. His knuckles were raw, red like they'd been scraped open. Dried streaks lined his wrists. "You all right?" I asked carefully. "Don't ever stop for the Buick," he whispered, and for the first time his pale eyes looked afraid. "Never, no matter how bad it feels, just keep driving." I swear the temperature in the car dropped 10 degrees at that moment. My breath fogged faintly on the windshield. "You mean you've seen it too?" But when I glanced back, the hitchhiker was gone.
Not like he'd opened the door or slipped up the road. Gone, as in his weight no longer pressed the seat. His backpack vanished, and the smell of burnt metal evaporated. I nearly swerved off Route 50, my pulse battered against my ribs. The road ahead stretched blank, unbroken. Desert scrub, faded yellow lines, the same horizon no closer than it had been hours ago. I was alone again. Kansas eventually gave way to Colorado, and then farther west into Utah, the landscape shifting into big skies and red rock canyons. Beautiful, people always said, but to me, after those nights, the land looked alien, ancient, watching. Sunset bled across the desert one evening when I pulled into an abandoned rest stop. Stone picnic tables cracked in the heat, weeds splitting the parking lot asphalt. My fuel gauge hovered dangerously close to empty, but the next gas marked on the map was still 80 miles. That's when I saw movement. Out past the picnic tables, among the rocks, a figure stood. Too far for detail, just the outline of a tall body, head cocked at an unnatural angle. I froze. The figure raised one arm, slow and deliberate, pointed straight at me. I had the feeling of being weighed, measured, chosen. My throat sealed tight, dry as the desert air. When I blinked, the figure was gone. And behind me, in the distance, 2 headlights flickered to life. The Buick. Always the Buick. The Buick's headlights didn't vanish this time. They stayed, twin beams hovering in the rearview mirror, steady as a predator tracking its prey. I tore out of the abandoned rest stop, the Escort's tires squealing, rubber burning against brittle asphalt. My car groaned at the speed, every bolt in its frame rattling like death bells. But the Buick held the same constant distance, never closer, never farther. 30 minutes passed, an hour. Each time I told myself it was gone, the mirror betrayed me. Those unblinking lights, patient, tireless. I tried everything, slowing down to 40, pushing past 90, taking sudden hard turns when the highway forked. But no matter what I did, the Buick returned, headlights carving the dark, right where I least wanted them. It wasn't following the roads, it was following me. Near midnight, running fumes, I finally saw salvation. A gas station glowing lonely against the Utah desert. The fluorescence buzzed, pale halos in the emptiness, like a relic carved out of darkness. I pulled in sharp, heart crashing against my ribs, and twisted the key hard enough I thought it might snap. The Escort gasped and shuddered into silence. The building looked alive but half asleep. Inside, a young cashier slouched behind the counter, earphones jammed in, nodding faintly to something I couldn't hear. The second I opened the door, the smell of burnt coffee washed over me, thick and bitter, like a warning. I forced calm into my voice. "You see a car pull in? Old Buick?" The kid barely glanced up. His eyes were glazed, movement sluggish, almost dreamlike. "Nope." I turned back toward the window. The Buick should have been there, idling at the edge of the lot. But the night was empty. Just my Escort, lonely under the buzzing lamps. I filled up on pump 3, dropping a card on the counter. As he swiped it absent-mindedly, I noticed something carved into the laminate surface of the counter. Shallow cuts, like a pocket knife had scratched them in. "Don't stay, don't sleep, don't look back." The letters slashed messy, but deliberate. A chill bent along my spine, my throat tightened. For half a moment I felt sure the kid hadn't carved it, but that he had been told to watch it over and over. I refueled in silence, eyes darting at every rustle in the desert. Each whisper of wind across the dunes felt like it carried a word meant only for me. When I climbed back into the driver's seat, the Buick was waiting. Out on the horizon now, its headlights hovering like the eyes of some patient predator, never blinking. I pressed into Nevada the next afternoon, exhaustion thick as syrup in my bloodstream. Route 50 here was barren. Miles of alkaline flats, the occasional shack rotting under the wide blue sky. Towns were reduced to a handful of crumbling buildings, tumbleweeds drifting through like they were the only permanent residents. They called this stretch the Great Basin. To me, it felt like the Earth's own graveyard, bleached bones just under the soil. By evening, my nerves frayed. No podcasts or music could stab through the silence. My phone had long since died of uselessness, the screen flashing no signal so long it felt like those words were burned into the glass. That's when I saw him. A figure.
Right in the middle of the road. I slammed the brakes. The Escort screeched, rubber clawing at the asphalt, and I lurched forward against the seatbelt, wind tearing at my lungs. There he stood, a man, or what looked like one, dressed in worn slacks and a white shirt too clean for this wasteland. His face was pale, nearly glowing in the dusk. No shadow bent from him under the falling sun. He didn't move, didn't flinch, just stared directly at me. I flashed the headlights, honked, shouted through the half-open window. Nothing. And then he stepped closer. The thin air turned sharp in my throat as his hands rose, slow, deliberate, palms outward like he was trying to press against the invisible shape of the car. When he smiled, the skin stretched too far across his jaw. That was enough. I shoved the gear into drive and swerved around him, nearly plunging into the ditch as the Escort howled past. For one fraction of a second, I glanced into the mirror. The man was there, in the back seat. I screamed, twisting the wheel, nearly flipping the car in panic. The tires screamed, gravel tearing loose under the skid. By the time I steadied, the seat behind me was empty. I drove until dawn, eyes never leaving the road ahead, hands welded to the wheel. Gray sunrise broke across a valley, and that's when I saw them. Husks of a forgotten town. Collapsed buildings leaned against brittle air. A church bell tower stood, but hollow, birds nesting through its skeleton windows. The sign at the edge read, "Welcome to Stillwater." Stillwater wasn't on my map. The Escort coughed complaints, begging for rest. Against my better judgment, against every screaming nerve in my body, I pulled in. The streets were empty, but signs, something about them made my veins ice. The shops advertised prices from decades ago. Faded posters clung to the walls, announcing events from 1971. Time ruptured here and forgot to repair itself. And then I noticed something worse. Every window, every dark, dusty pane seemed angled slightly downward, looking at me. That's when the Buick rolled in at the far end of town. It glided without sound, without dust kicked from its wheels. It paused, like a hound catching a scent, and then its headlights blinked twice straight into me. A signal. An invitation. I didn't wait to see what it wanted. I ran back to the Escort, slammed the locks, and tore down the broken road out of Stillwater. I never looked back until the crumbling town shrank into desert heat shimmers, dissolving into the horizon like maybe it had never been there at all. But the Buick, I knew it would follow, and west still stretched endless. By the time the sun shrank behind Nevada's jagged ridges, my body was at its breaking point. Eyes raw, hands stiff on the wheel, every muscle in my back screamed for rest. I told myself I wouldn't stop again. Every motel had been worse than the last. But then, a glowing vacancy sign bloomed ahead like a mirage. A squat L-shaped building sat beneath it, stucco peeling, one story, maybe 15 doors. A place lost somewhere between 1950 and the present. Its name, Silver Sky Lodge. I almost kept going. God knows I should have. But my vision blurred along the edges, and I knew if I pushed through the night, I'd drift the escort into a ditch. The Buick was nowhere in sight. That seemed like a blessing. Inside, the air carried a stale weight. A man checked me in this time, not an old woman, middle-aged, balding, with a vague half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You're lucky," he said, sliding over the key. "The road doesn't see many travelers after dark." "I guess I'm stubborn," I muttered. His eyes flicked toward the window, then back to me. "He don't open the curtains," he said simply. "What?" "Not at night," he repeated, and his half-smile faltered for the first time. "Things look back." Room 7 smelled of dust and faintly of copper. I dropped onto the bed, shoes still on. My eyelids dragged shut. But sometime past midnight, I awoke. Something scratched faintly along my door. Not a knock, not claws, more like a deliberate drawing sound, metal against wood. Then silence. Against every command of my mind, I moved to the curtain, fingers hovering toward it. That's when I remembered the clerk's warning. Don't open them. I stopped, but I swear, and God help me on this, I could see, faintly, a glow through the tiny split in the cloth. Twin beams of white light pressed against the crack. Headlights. I didn't breathe until dawn. The next day, I peeled out without checking out, gravel spraying behind me. Nevada rolled past in a haze of salt flats and lifeless dust. By late afternoon, I began climbing into the Sierra Nevadas. The mountains rose jagged, blue-black against the sky, patches of snow still clinging to their ribs. Pines crowded the road now, shadows thickening between them. And here's the strange thing. The farther I drove into the mountains, the road grew quiet. Not silent, quiet in the way a church feels when you walk in alone, like the air itself was waiting. Around a sharp bend, I saw it again. An old diner. Not a copy, the same diner I'd passed back in Kansas. The same chrome siding, the same sagging sign reading Mavis Place. Except now it was here, 1,000 miles west. I slammed the brakes, gravel flew, heart screaming. I stared in disbelief. And as I sat frozen, the Buick rolled smoothly out of the diner lot. Slow, purposeful, its headlights flared once, as though greeting me. Then it turned back onto the road ahead. I followed without meaning to. The Buick led me up the winding incline until a gaping black tunnel swallowed the highway. An old mining cut by the looks of it, carved through stone and darkness, no lights inside. The Buick disappeared into it without slowing. I jerked the wheel to stop on the gravel shoulder. My hands shook. Every nerve screamed for me to turn around, leave the Sierra, abandon this cursed trail of roads. But another voice whispered inside my head, a voice that didn't feel mine. "You've come this far. Do you want to know why?" I sat there, engine idling low, breath shallow, staring into the hole of that tunnel. The dark seemed alive, pulsing faintly, as if it were breathing. And then, very softly, from inside my own radio, even though the car was shut completely down, "Come through." The same whisper that had haunted me since Kansas. I eased the escort into gear, pressed the gas, and entered the tunnel. Darkness swallowed everything. Only my headlights cut through, a narrow cone trembling against concrete walls, slick with dripping water. The sound of it echoed, too loud, too close. Halfway through, the radio hissed to life again without warning. This time it wasn't words, just laughter. Twisted, broken laughter that crawled under my skin until I gritted my teeth, knuckles white against the wheel. And then the lights ahead appeared. The Buick, parked sideways across the road, blocking the tunnel. Its headlights glared straight into me, blinding. I slammed the brakes, screeched to a stop yards short of hitting it. For a breathless eternity, nothing moved. Just my beams stabbing the Buick, its lights searing mine, locked in a violent stare. Then, the Buick's engine shut off. Its lights died. One blink, and it ceased to exist. The tunnel was empty. But when I drove out into the open air on the other side, I knew something vital had changed. The sky didn't look the same shade of blue. The trees leaned at wrong angles. The world itself felt bent. I was no longer sure I was in my America anymore. The air on the other side of that tunnel pressed thick against my lungs. Pine trees rose, but their needles looked too dark, glassy almost, shimmering like blades. The mountains loomed closer, jagged spines crowding the horizon. The escort rattled along, but the gauges on the dash no longer made sense. The mileage counter rolled backward. The fuel needle twitched randomly, empty, then full, then back again, as though mocking me. I glanced at the clock on the dash, 3:17 p.m. When I looked again 5 minutes later, it showed 12:03 a.m. Panic surged, but I kept driving. I told myself, don't stop. The hitchhiker's words clung to my skull like a disease. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed the road signs. Every 3 miles, a metal sign jutted from the dirt, each one identical, black letters carved deep. You are going the wrong way. The 4th sign said, we are behind you. I refused to look at the mirror. I couldn't. By dusk, if it even was dusk, I crested a rise and saw light scattered in a valley ahead. Civilization at last. My chest lifted with desperate relief. The town seemed lively from a distance, little dots of yellow glowing from homes, smoke curling faintly. But as I drove in, relief turned to stone. The houses were pristine, frozen in the style of the 1950s, chrome-trimmed cars on drives, manicured lawns, mailboxes upright. But there were no people. No voices, no footsteps, not even the echo of a television hum. Doors hung open like cracked shells. Dinner plates sat on tables, food untouched, fossilized in dust. And every so often, worst of all, I thought I saw curtains shift, like people were still inside, watching me pass. I rolled through the town square. At the edge sat a movie theater, marquee letters still bold. Coming soon, Mavis's place. The words hollowed me out. Something tied it all together. The diner, the motel, the Buick. A name repeating like a chant burned into the highways. Mavis. I pressed the gas, desperate to get through, desperate not to listen to the feeling that eyes followed me. But halfway down Main Street, the escort coughed and died. The wheel locked. The lights flickered once, then out. I tried the key again and again. Nothing. Dead silence. And then, as if on cue, Headlights flared behind me. The Buick. It rolled closer, smooth as water. The engine purred low, almost a growl. My throat tightened. This was it. Everything led to this moment. The Buick slowed, stopped inches from my bumper. Its grille gleamed under the streetlight, chrome fangs bared. The tinted windows reflected nothing. Then the driver's door creaked open.
I bolted outside. The Buick idled yards away, deep growl echoing across the cliffs. Its driver door hung open, a black hole yawning into nowhere. Something gestured from inside, a long, pale hand, beckoning. I did the unthinkable. I climbed in. The seat swallowed me. Cold vinyl burned against my back. The air smelled of gasoline, copper, and rot. I turned, and there was no driver. Only the wheel, worn smooth where countless hands had gripped it. The door slammed shut. Headlights flared. The Buick roared forward, tires screaming against asphalt. But my hands weren't on the wheel. The car drove itself, tearing into mountain roads at 80, 90, 100 miles per hour, turns taken with impossible precision, cliffs falling away inches from the tires. The radio fizzed alive. Voices poured out, a chorus this time. Men, women, children, hundreds layered in a storm. Don't stop, don't stop, don't stop. You belong, you belong, you belong. One more for the road. I screamed, clawing at the door handle. It wouldn't open. My fists pummeled glass that didn't shatter. My body shook, but the Buick didn't slow. We rose higher into the Sierra, tearing through tunnels, past forests, past valleys that looked warped, unreal, bent like a funhouse mirror. Every so often, lights on the roadside blinked into the shape of faces, those pale watchers. Thousands now, watching silently as the Buick carried me west. At last, the Buick skidded to a halt. Its brakes shrieked, rubber smoking. We had stopped at a rest area, or what might have once been one. The picnic tables were nothing but piles of ash. Signs stood tall but blank. Every tree ringed the lot perfectly evenly, like soldiers around a grave. The Buick's engine cut. Lights died. The door unlocked with a click. I staggered out, legs shaking, lungs clawing for air. The silence here was so deep it throbbed in my ears. Then I saw her. A woman leaned against the far railing, staring out across the mountains. Her dress was waitress white, stained and faded, her hair pinned in curls. I didn't turn, but I knew her name before I asked. Mavis? Her voice floated soft, like a sigh. Another one. They always send another one. I swallowed, throat raw. Why me? Why follow me across half the country? She finally looked back. Her face was pale, too pale, with eyes that flickered headlights, two burning beams in her skull. Because you left the road, you took the cut, and it saw you. Now it won't let you go. The earth beneath me trembled faintly, like an engine idling below the soil. Around us, the trees shifted, not in wind, but as though leaning closer. Mavis smiled mournfully. You can drive forever, or you can stay here. Those are the only two choices here. Behind me, the Buick's door opened again. Waiting. The Buick idled behind me, door open, its interior black as a starless void. The smell of burning oil tainted the thin mountain air. Mavis leaned against the railing, her gaze heavy with something deeper than pity. You don't get to go back, Eric. No one does. Only forward. Always forward. My throat tightened. I wanted to argue, wanted to scream that she was wrong, that I had a life back east, parents, friends, dreams. But the words withered in my mouth, because deep down, I knew the truth. Every mile since that shortcut had been pulling me here. "Why me?" I whispered again. She tilted her head. "You looked for roads no one goes down. You wanted something other people don't. That's all it takes." The sky overhead flickered, not like lightning, like film reel strips burning. For a second, I saw nothing but black and white images of cars tearing endlessly down highways, their drivers' faces flack, hollow, eyes glowing faint beams of white. Mavis's eyes locked on mine. "Drive forever, or stay here with the rest." And then I saw them. Figures stepped out from the trees, their movements in perfect sync. Men in overalls, women in diner skirts, kids clutching empty toys. The same faces I'd seen at windows, behind curtains, along the side of roads. Their eyes lit faint white as they encircled the rest stop. Trapped souls. My gut dropped as one thought crashed into me. If I didn't choose now, I'd be one of them. The Buick waited, door open, polished as if new, chrome untouched by the decades. I stared inside, felt its pull, like gravity made of whispers. I could already imagine it. Endless highways stretched ahead of me. The never-stopping road where day and night bled into a single smear. Where gas never ran out, where voices filled the static with laughter not meant for human throats. The second choice was worse. Stay here. Ashes, silence. Pressed into a ring of ghosts, waiting for eternity. Neither was escape. But maybe there was a third way. I snapped my head back to Mavis. Has anyone ever fought it? Her smile twisted, a flash of pain cracking her mask. They tried. The road doesn't lose. I clenched my fists. Then I'll burn it. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes softened, almost like relief. I stumbled back to the Buick, not to enter it, but to pop the trunk. For once it obeyed, creaking open. Inside lay items scattered across stained carpet. An old tire iron, yellowed road maps marking highways that no longer existed, and a red plastic gas can, half full. I grabbed it with shaking hands. The road encircled me now, figures pressing closer, static hissing through the air as though it emanated from their throats. Headlights blinked in the Buick sockets, strobing violent, pulsing with anger. "Burn with me," I shouted into the howl of voices. My hand shook, but fury pressed me further. I doused the interior, the gasoline choking the night in acrid fumes. The Buick roared to life, or tried. Its engine revved, without ignition, furious like a caged beast. I flicked the lighter I always carried, an old habit from college parties, and fire spat to life in my hand. "Not forever," I told it. Then I threw the flame inside. The Buick screamed. No metal should scream like that. Its frame convulsed, chrome bending, headlights bursting into raw white fire. The flames consumed fast, unnaturally eager, rising higher than gasoline should ever allow. The figures in the trees shrieked with it. Their mouths opened in soundless cries, their bodies convulsing, then snapping into ash one by one. Mavis stood last, her pale form trembling at the railing. Firelight bent across her face. For a moment her eyes dimmed, no longer headlights, but human again. "You broke it. Or maybe it just chose someone else. Either way, you'll never outrun it." Her body cracked in the fire's roar, scattering into embers that rose into the mountain air. I stood alone, chest heaving, the Buick melting into a slag heap of smoking death. The static ceased, the forest hushed, and for the first time in weeks, the night was truly quiet. At dawn,
I found another road winding west. A real road. Painted lines, cracked shoulders, but no tricks. My legs trembled carrying me down it, until an old pickup came humming around the bend. A rancher stopped, offered me a lift to Sacramento. He didn't ask why I looked sunburned, blistered, and ragged, and I didn't try to explain. The further we drove, the more the nightmare seemed to fade into dream. A long, impossible dream of Buicks and burning roads. But the smell never left. Even in that truck cab, I swore I smelled gasoline and iron curling into the air. And when the radio flickered once, with faint static just for a second, one phrase slid through. 1 more mile. That was months ago. People think I came home safe from a road trip gone wrong. They don't see how I avoid highways, how I flinch at headlights, how I throw away road maps like they're cursed parchment. Because I know the truth. I didn't win. I only delayed it. Somewhere out there, among empty diners or ash-blown motels, the Buick is waiting. Maybe it's being rebuilt. Maybe it's already whole again. And one night, when I grow restless and crave the road, when the highway calls like it always calls, its headlights will find me. Because no one outruns the road forever.